Thank you all for coming tonight, and I imagine there'll be a couple more people joining us a little bit late. Thank folks on YouTube for joining us. Does anybody have any comments or questions about anything that we've been talking about in regard to the Lalitavistara Sutra, the play in full? Okay. Well, then, I'd just like to say before we get started that what this particular section, this chapter 22, is a relatively short. It's got 75 verses, but they're pretty short verses. And so what I'd like to do is read from the first verse all the way through the end, and then we'll come back and talk about it. But just as a preview of what it is that is going to be discussed here by the Buddha are, first off, are going to be the four absorptions of meditative concentration. It's going to talk about mindfulness. It's going to talk about no projection of oneself, talk about one taste, and talk about non-meditation. So these are the four absorptions. They can be explained in many different terms, but those are the most succinct of the four absorptions. He's going to be talking about activating the pristine divine eye beyond that of humans to recognize dualistic nature. So the divine eye that recognizes the pristine divine nature, dualistic nature, excuse me. And he's also going to be talking about the three stations of the night: the station of knowledge, the station of recollecting past lives, and the intent to actualize the knowledge that brings suffering and its origin to an end, and realizes the insight that exhausts defilements. He's going to talk about the realization of old age and dying. He's going to talk about preventing existence. He's going to be talking about the four truths in relation to the 12 links. He's going to be talking about the four truths, but also the 12 links. The attainment of the threefold knowledge of moral conduct, morality, of samadhi, concentration, and the prajna wisdom, which is talking about practical and inexpressible, how this threefold knowledge relates to the practical and to the inexpressible. And a declaration of the end of suffering, that he declares his end of suffering. And the complete awakening. He sees the Dharma as medicine, and he spends 7 days on the seat of awakening. And he goes through, and there is the joy of all the Buddhas and the gods and the goddesses, and the goddesses' praise that are expressed. And then all this comes together as the perfect and complete awakening of the Buddha. So what this is an explanation that this is an example. This is his experience that we all have the potential within ourselves. So he's living it for our benefit. He's giving this explanation for our benefit and so on. So this particular chapter is very, very powerful. So if we can, let's begin. If Bernie, if you'll read the first page, and then Kunga, if you'll read the second page, please, and then Brendan, if you'll read the third page, then I'll read the fourth page, and we'll keep that order. And if Zara comes in and Matthew comes in, I'll just interrupt and get them to read in after Brendan would read, and then I would read, and someone like that. So we'll do that.
Okay.
One second. I'm just
I start now?
one moment, please. Okay, now I'm ready, please. So go ahead.
Okay. Chapter 22, Perfect and Complete Awakening. Monks, once the Bodhisattva had destroyed his demonic opponents, vanquished his enemies, triumphed in the face of battle, and raised high the parasols, standards, and banners of conquest, he settled into the first meditative concentration. That state is free from desires, free of factors connected with evil deeds and non-virtues, accompanied by thought and analysis, and imbued with the joy and pleasure born of discernment. When he had brought about the cessation of thought and analysis, he became perfectly quiet in and of himself, and therefore his mind became concentrated. Through this, he settled into the second meditative concentration, which is free of thought and analysis and is imbued with the joy and pleasure born of meditative absorption. Through disenchantment with joy, he remained impartial, maintained mindfulness and introspection, and experienced physical pleasure. He thus settled into the third meditative concentration, which is unconnected with joy. The noble one called upon such a person, the impartial one dwelling on pleasure that is imbued with mindfulness. Through relinquishing pleasure in that moment and having formerly relinquished pain in the past, both mental pleasure and displeasure vanished. Then he settled into the fourth meditative concentration, which is perfectly pristine impartiality and mindfulness, unconnected with pleasure or pain. When the Bodhisattva's mind, purified and cleansed, lucid, free of basic and subsidiary afflictions, gentle, adaptable, and immovable, was immersed in this way. In the early station of the night, he produced the intent to actualize the knowledge that sees wisdom with the divine eye, and so he directed his mind toward that purpose. Thus, the Bodhisattva, with pristine divine eye beyond that of humans, looked at sentient beings. He saw them dying and being born in all their beauty and ugliness, in favorable and unfavorable conditions, degenerating or advancing precisely in accord with their actions. With this understanding, he thought,
Alas, sentient beings engage in negative physical, verbal, and mental conduct. Harboring wrong views, they revile the noble ones. As they engage in the actions associated with wrong views, once their bodies collapse and they die, they fall into bad migrations and are born among the hell realms. Yet other sentient beings engage in positive physical, verbal, and mental conduct. Harboring the correct view, they do not revile noble ones. Since they engage in the actions associated with the correct view, once their bodies collapse and they die, they are born into pleasant existences in the God realms. In this manner, with his pristine divine eye, beyond that of humans, the Bodhisattva saw sentient beings dying and being born in all their beauty and ugliness, in favorable and unfavorable circumstances, degenerating and advancing respectively, precisely in accordance with their actions. Monks, this was indeed how, during the first station of the night, the Bodhisattva actualized knowledge, removed darkness, and lit the light. Then, while his mind, purified and cleansed, lucid, free of basic and subsidiary afflictions, supple, flexible, and immovable, was immersed in this way, in the middle station of the night, the Bodhisattva produced the intent to actualize the knowledge that sees the wisdom of recollecting past lives. And so he directed his mind towards that purpose. In this way, he recollected the previous lives of himself and other sentient beings, starting with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 lifetimes, then 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 more lifetimes, then 100 lifetimes, 1,000 lifetimes, 100,000 lifetimes, then many hundreds of thousands of lifetimes, 10 million lifetimes, a billion lifetimes, 10 billion lifetimes, a trillion lifetimes, and a quadrillion lifetimes, then several billion, several tens of billions, several trillions, and several quadrillions of lifetimes, all the way up to lifetimes in an eon of destruction, an eon of formation, an eon of both destruction and formation, and several eons of both destruction and formation. He remembered the former lives of himself and others in the greatest detail, thinking, in that place I had this name, this surname, this family, this caste, this pleasure and pain. And after falling from there, I was born here. After falling from there, I was born here.
Then, while his mind, purified and cleansed, lucid, free of basic and subsidiary afflictions, supple, flexible, and immovable, was immersed in this way during the final station of the night, just at the break of dawn, right at the time of night when the morning drum is beaten, the Bodhisattva produced the intent to actualize the knowledge that brings suffering and its origin to an end, and realizes the insight that exhausts defilements. And so he directed his mind to that purpose. He thought, how miserable is this world! It is anguished by birth, old age, sickness, death, departure, and rebirth. But it does not know how to remove itself from this massive heap of pure anguish, marked foremost by old age, sickness, and death. Alas, if only beings understood how to extinguish this massive heap of pure anguish, marked foremost by old age, sickness, and death. Then the Bodhisattva continued to think, what is the prerequisite for old age and dying to take place? And what is the causal condition of aging and death? It then occurred to him, aging and death happen when there is birth. Birth is the causal condition of old age and death. Then the Bodhisattva thought again, what is the prerequisite for birth to take place? What is the causal condition of birth? It then occurred to him, birth happens when there is existence. Existence is the causal condition of birth. Then the Bodhisattva wondered, what is the prerequisite for existence to emerge? What is the causal condition of existence? It then occurred to the Bodhisattva, existence occurs when there is clinging. Clinging is the causal condition of existence. Then the Bodhisattva wondered, what is the prerequisite for clinging to occur? What is the causal condition of clinging? It then occurred to him, clinging occurs when there is craving. Craving is the causal condition of clinging. Then the Bodhisattva thought, what is the prerequisite for craving to take place? What is the causal condition of craving? It then occurred to him, craving occurs when there is feeling. Feeling is the causal condition of craving. The Bodhisattva then wondered, what is the prerequisite for feeling to take place? What is the causal condition of feeling? It then occurred to him, feeling happens when there is contact. Contact is the causal condition of feeling. Then the Bodhisattva thought, what is the prerequisite for contact to occur? What is the causal condition of contact? It then occurred to him, contact happens when the six sense fields are present. The six sense fields are the causal condition of contact.
Then the Bodhisattva wondered, what is the prerequisite for the six sense fields to emerge? What is the causal condition of the six sense fields? It then occurred to him, the six sense fields emerge when there is name and form. Name and form is the causal condition of the six sense fields. The Bodhisattva then thought, what is the prerequisite for name and form to come into being? What is the causal condition of name and form? It then occurred to him, name and form come into being when there is consciousness. Consciousness is the causal condition of name and form. Then the Bodhisattva wondered, what is the prerequisite for consciousness to form? What is the causal condition of consciousness? It then occurred to him, consciousness emerges when there are formations. Formations are the causal condition of consciousness. The Bodhisattva then pondered, what is the prerequisite for formations to form? What is the causal condition for formations? It then occurred to him, formations come into being when there is ignorance. Ignorance is the causal condition of formations. Then monks, The thought occurred to the Bodhisattva. Ignorance provides the causal condition for formations. Formations provide the causal condition for consciousness. Consciousness provides the causal condition for name and form. Name and form provides the causal condition for the 6 sense fields. The 6 sense fields provide the causal condition for contact. Contact provides the causal condition for feeling. Feeling provides the causal condition for craving. Craving provides the causal condition for clinging. Clinging provides the causal condition for existence. Existence provides the causal condition for birth. Birth provides the causal condition for old age and death. Lamentation, pain, despair, and torment. Such is how this massive heap of pure anguish comes into being. Monks, through considering and ruminating over these factors, which had never before been heard, there dawned in the Bodhisattva wisdom, vision, knowledge, intelligence, prudence, and insight, and the light began to shine. Then the Bodhisattva thought, what must be absent for old age and death not to occur? What must be prevented to eliminate old age and death? It then occurred to him that there is no birth. When there is no birth, old age and death do not happen. Old age and death are prevented by preventing birth. Then the Bodhisattva pondered, what must be absent for birth not to happen? What must be prevented to eliminate birth? The thought then occurred to him, when there is no existence, birth does not take place. Birth is eliminated by preventing existence.
Then the Bodhisattva then considered, what must be absent to avoid everything down to formations to manifest? What must be prevented to eliminate formations? It then occurred to him, when there is no ignorance, formations do not form. Preventing ignorance prevents formations. By preventing formations, consciousness is prevented, and so on, until birth is prevented, thus putting an end to old age and death, anguish, lamentation, pain, despair, and torment. Such is how the massive heap of pure anguish is brought to an end. Monks, through considering and ruminating over these factors that had never before been heard, there dawned in the Bodhisattva wisdom, vision, knowledge, intelligence, prudence, and insight, and a light began to shine. Monks, on that occasion, I accurately understood 4 truths. I understood that the defiled is suffering, the source of the defiled, how the defiled is brought to cessation, and the path that leads to the cessation of the defiled. I accurately understood the defilement of desire, the defilement of craving, the defilement of ignorance, and the defilement of beliefs. I understood when exactly these defilements come to an end without leaving any residue, and where exactly these defilements vanish and disappear without leaving any residue. I accurately understood the identity of ignorance, the source of ignorance, the cessation of ignorance, and the path leading to the cessation. I understood where exactly all ignorance without exception vanishes and disappears. And further, I accurately understood the precise identity of formations, the source of formations, the cessation of formations, and the path leading to their cessation. I accurately understood the precise identity of consciousness, the source of consciousness, the cessation of consciousness, and the path leading to its cessation. I accurately understood the precise identity of name and form, the source of name and form, the cessation of name and form, and the path leading to its cessation. I accurately understood the precise identity of the six sense fields, the source of the six sense fields, the cessation of the sixth sense field, and the path leading to their cessation. I accurately understood the precise identity of contact, the source of contact, the cessation of contact, the path leading to the cessation. I accurately understood the precise identity of feeling, the source of feeling, the cessation of feeling, and the path leading to its cessation. I accurately understood the precise identity of craving, the source of cravings, the cessation of craving, and the path leading to its cessation. I accurately understood the precise identity of clinging, the source of clinging, the cessation of clinging, the path leading to the cessation. I accurately understood the precise identity of existence, the source of existence, the cessation of existence, and the path leading to its cessation. I accurately understood the precise identity of birth, the source of birth, the cessation of birth, and the path leading to its cessation.
I accurately understood the precise identity of old age, the source of old age, the cessation of old age, and the path leading to its cessation. I accurately understood the precise identity of death, the source of death, the cessation of death, and the path leading to its cessation. I accurately understood precisely how this massive heap of pure suffering, with its anguish, lamentation, pain, despair, and torment, comes into being, and how it ceases. I accurately understood the precise identity of suffering, the source of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to its cessation. Thus, monks, sure enough, during the final station of night, just at the break of dawn, right at the time for the beating of the morning drum, the Bodhisattva, the being, the good being, the supreme being, the great being, the ox among men, the elephant among men, the lion among men, the bull among men, the hero among men, the champion among men, the adept among men, the lotus among men, the white lotus among men, the supreme beast of burden among men, the unexcelled charioteer among men, reached unexcelled, perfect, and complete awakening. Attaining the threefold knowledge, he did so through knowledge that consists of one-pointed insight into everything that might be known, understood, attained, realized, and actualized via the wisdom of the noble ones. Monks, then the gods said, "Friends, let us scatter flowers. The Blessed One has reached perfect awakening." But just then some gods, who had seen Buddhas before, came together and told the others, "Friends, since perfect and complete Buddhas of the past all produced and manifested a sign, do not toss flowers until the Blessed One has made a sign." Monks, the thus gone one knew that the gods were in doubt, so he ascended into the sky to the height of 7 palm trees, and while seated there he uttered this phrase of exaltation: "The path has been interrupted, impurities have been extinguished, the outflows have dried up and flow no longer. The path now ended, I travel no longer. This is called the end of suffering." The gods thus strewed the thus gone one with celestial flowers, piling them up to his knees.
Monks, then the thus gone one reached complete awakening in this manner. A thick darkness was lifted, craving was purified, beliefs were eradicated, the afflictions were rattled, the splinter was removed, the knot was untied, the flag of pride was brought down, the flag of righteousness was lifted, latent formations were uprooted, the suchness of phenomenon became known, the absolute was comprehended, the realm of phenomena was understood. The nature of sentient beings was ascertained. Those oriented toward reality were approved of. Those oriented toward mistakenness were disapproved of. The indeterminate were accepted. The faculties of sentient beings were seen in all their variety. The conduct of sentient beings was understood. The cure for the illnesses of sentient beings was comprehended, and the medicinal concoction of immortality was employed. He became the king of physicians who would liberate beings from all suffering and establish them in the bliss of nirvana. He took his seat on the magnificent royal throne of the thus gone ones, the essence of the thus gone ones. He discovered the means to complete liberation and entered the city of omniscience, where he mingled perfectly with all Buddhas and became inseparable from the comprehension of the realm of phenomena. Monks, the thus gone one, abided on the seat of awakening for the first 7 days, reflecting. Here I have brought an end to the suffering of birth, old age, and death, which has been happening since time immemorial. Monks, indeed, the very moment that the Bodhisattva attained omniscience, all beings throughout all the worlds in the 10 directions instantly became ecstatic. All the worlds were flooded with bright light, including even the dark spaces between them that were riddled with evil. All the worlds throughout the 10 directions shook in 6 ways. They quivered, trembled, and quaked, wobbled, rocked, and swayed. They vibrated, shuddered, and reeled, rattled, shook, and convulsed. They clattered, rattled, and clanged, boomed, thundered, and roared. All the Buddhas offered congratulations to the thus gone one for reaching perfect and complete awakening, and conferred upon him religious gifts. With these religious gifts, the trichylocosm became covered with a jeweled parasol, and from that jeweled parasol issued forth a network of light rays, which illuminated the immeasurable and innumerable worlds throughout the 10 directions. Then the bodhisattvas and gods throughout the 10 directions uttered an expression of joy. An adept among beings, a lotus on the lake of wisdom, has appeared. Untainted by mundane concerns, he will cause a cloud of great compassion to mass, which will shower throughout the realm of phenomena. The gentle rain of Dharma, medicine to living beings, will cause all the seeds of the roots of virtue to sprout, bring growth to the saplings of faith, and yield the fruits of liberation.
Zara, can you read now? Can you read this page? Are you with us? You're muted.
Sorry, yes. So we're at 2239.
Correct.
Yeah. On this topic, it is said, since he defeated Mara, along with his hordes, he is indeed a lion among men. When this teacher actualized the bliss of concentration and attained the threefold knowledge by means of tenfold power, many tens of billions, millions of Buddhas' realms throughout 10 directions trembled. These bodhisattvas who had previously come desiring the Dharma bowed before his feet and said, "Are you not tired? We have witnessed this army as terrifying as it was, banished by the strength of your insight, merit, and diligence." Parasols were carried by the Buddhas of 100 billion realms, who said, "Well done, great being, who overpowered the demonic hordes and attained the sublime state, deathless and free of anguish. Swiftly shower down the rain of true Dharma throughout the 3 worlds." The best of beings throughout the 10 directions extended their arms and said in the voice of a cuckoo's call, "Just as we attained awakening, you too have reached the pristine state. We are just like butter and clarified better." Then the goddesses of the desire realm perceived that the thus gone one on the seat of awakening had attained higher knowledge, fulfilled his purpose, and become victorious in battle. He had vanquished the demonic opponents, raised parasols, standards, and flags, and became a hero, a supreme victor, a man, a great man, a supreme physician, and a great remover of thorns. Like a lion, he was fearless and without worry. Like an elephant, he was gentle. Since he had relinquished the 3 stains, he was stainless. He was knowledgeable. Since he had actualized the threefold knowledge, he had reached the other shore. Since he had crossed the 4 rivers, he was of royal caste. Since he upheld the single jewel parasol, a priest of 3 worlds. Since he had abandoned evil actions and the mendicant, since he has cracked open the eggshell of ignorance. An ascetic, since he had perfectly transcended all attachment. A gentleman, since he had eradicated afflictions. A hero, since he did not let the banner fall. A powerhouse, since he was endowed with the 10 powers. A jewel mine, since he was replete with all the gems of Dharma.
Knowing this, the goddesses approached the seat of awakening and praised the thus gone one with these verses. Having defeated the demon hordes at the trunk of the king of trees, he sits there unshakable like Mount Meru, fearless and silent. Through practicing generosity, discipline, and restraint, for many tens of millions of eons, he attained perfect sublime awakening, and therefore shines here today. Through practicing discipline, vows, and austerities, for many tens of millions of eons, while seeking awakening, he outshines Chakra and Brahma. Through wearing the strong armor of forbearance, for many tens of millions of eons, he embraced suffering and therefore shines like gold. Through the strength and intensity of his valor, over many tens of millions of eons, he drove away his opponents, and thus triumphed over Mara's army. Through his concentration, higher knowledge, and wisdom, enacted over many tens of millions of eons, he revered the best of sages, and is therefore honored now himself. Through his insight, learning, and accumulations, developed over the course of tens of millions of eons, he has benefited tens of millions of sentient beings, and thus swiftly attained awakening. He has triumphed over the demon of the aggregates, and likewise over the Lord of Death and the demon of afflictions. He has also triumphed over the demon of the gods. Thus he has no anguish. The God of gods, this God of gods, revered even by the gods, is worthy of reverence throughout the three worlds as a field for those seeking merit.
He yields the fruit of immortality. He is a sublime object of veneration. When a donation is given to him, the result is never-ending until the attainment of supreme awakening. The hair between his eyebrows radiates light, illuminating many tens of millions of locales. Outshining even the sun and the moon, he is a light unto all sentient beings. His form is handsome, sublime, and well-proportioned, replete with the best of characteristics, and poised to be of benefit. It is worthy of reverence through the three worlds. His eyes are pristine. They spontaneously see the myriad insentient and sentient, the locales and multitudes of beings. His ears are pristine. They hear infinite sounds, those of gods and humans, and those of the victorious one's Dharma. His tongue is long, and it is melodious as a cuckoo's voice. Let us listen to him speak about the Dharma as an ambrosia that brings about great peace. Even witnessing Mara's army, his mind is unperturbed. From seeing the multitudes of gods, his sensible mind is not ecstatic. It was not with knives and arrows that he defeated Mara's army. Rather, it was with truth, restraint, and austerity that he overcame the villainous thugs. Without being displaced from his seat, his body was unharmed. On that occasion, he was neither affectionate nor even angry.
Those gods and humans who listen to the Dharma from you and strive to accomplish it, procure the desired acquisition. Through the merit of praising you, O victorious one, replete with the resplendence of merit, may we all immediately become like you, O moon among men. Once the guide, a bull among men, had awakened to Buddhahood, hundreds of billions of realms trembled, and Mara was vanquished. Then, in the cadence of Brahma and the melody of cuckoo, the guide first spoke these verses. Merit, fully ripened, brings happiness and vanquishes all suffering. The wishes of a person with merit will be accomplished. They will overcome Mara quickly, reach awakening, and attain nirvana, the tranquil state of peace. Thus, who could get their fill of making merit? Who could be satiated in listening to ambrosia like Dharma? Who could get enough of dwelling in deserted forests? Who could get enough of working for the welfare of beings? Extending his hand, he said to the Bodhisattvas, respect has been paid, thus return to your own places. All of them bowed to the feet of the thus gone one, and returned to their own abodes in magnificent arrays. After witnessing the great demonic horde advancing, and the well-gone one toying auspiciously with them, beings out of unparalleled wish to reach awakening said, may we vanquish Mara and his horde, and thus reach the deathless state. Monks, even while the thus gone one reached perfect and complete awakening, seated on his lion's throne at the trunk of a tree of awakening, he simultaneously manifests such innumerable displays of awakened playful activities that they would not be easy to reveal even in an eon. On this topic, it is said, the earth became as even as the palm of a hand. 100-petaled lotuses in full bloom arose in a flood of light. Hundreds of thousands of gods bowed down to the seat of awakening and witnessed there the one who was first heralded by a lion's roar.
Hundreds of trees in the trichylocosm and also its mountains, along with Meru, king of mountains, bowed to the seat of awakening. Approaching the one with the 10 powers, Brahma and Sakra paid homage. Such was the play of the lion among men while at the seat of awakening. Hundreds of thousands of light rays radiated from his body, pervading the perfect realms of the victorious ones and pacifying the 3 lower realms. Through this, the unfortunate states were dried up in a mere fraction of an instant, and hardness, conceit, and hatred were rendered harmless to any sentient being. Such was the play of the lion among men while he sat in his seat. The resplendent tuft of hair on his forehead outshone the radiance of the sun, moon, jewels, fire, lightning, and gods. And the crown of the teacher's head was not beheld by any being whatsoever. Such was the play of the lion among men while he sat in his seat. By touching the earth with the palm of his hand, it trembled in 6 ways. This shook Mara's hordes as if they were tufts of cotton. Mara, brandishing an arrow, etched images in the earth. Such was the play of the lion among men while he sat in his seat.
Please continue. Brendan?
Yes.
The last line, please.
This concludes the 22nd chapter on perfect and complete awakening.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Bernie, I want to ask everybody, but Bernie, what's your comment on this? What do you think of this chapter?
Okay, well, it's pretty standard stuff. Basically, we start with the description of the four jhana states which are associated with form, and it said the Buddha attained the 4th of these states and used that state to see his previous births, not only his births, but the births of all beings. And from that, he attained the knowledge of what's the cause of birth and death, which we then go through a cycle of the link of conditioned co-production, 12 links, both forward and backwards several times. And then we arrive at the Four Noble Truths through examining the 12 links. So this is basically describing the process by which Buddha attained his wisdom, first through the meditation, then through this examination of a rebirth through his psychic abilities, and then by using that as the evidence, he was able to discern the 12 links of conditioned co-production, and from that he was able to derive what we now know as the Four Noble Truths. And after that, we have a long section on the rejoicing of the gods and the description of the attainment of the Buddha. So it's the text is this chapter is more or less divided into those 2 parts. The first part being kind of analytical, and the second part being more or less for the faithful, a sense of reverence to the Buddha and for everything he had attained. So I don't know we could go into what the whole thing is, but that's the sort of summary of what the whole chapter was about.
Yeah, so how do you relate to that?
Well, it's how do I relate to that? Well, of course, it's on the one hand fairly familiar stuff, but it on the second hand, it does show how all these teachings are interrelated, and that was kind of a new way of presenting it to me. the one develops out of the other. It's impossible to gain an understanding of karma without first attaining a certain level of meditation, and it's not possible to attain an understanding of the 12 links without an understanding of how karma occurs in the lives of all beings. So it's not able to understand the Four Noble Truths without first understanding the 12 links of conditioned co-production. So all the major teachings of, what we would call now Theravadan Buddhism or Hinayana Buddhism are all sort of summed up in this one little chapter. That's what I got out of it. I don't know how other people feel, but that's my take on it.
Thank you. Yes. Well, Kunga, how would you comment on this chapter?
It's very full. There's a lot in there, definitely. I don't think I've read as detailed account before on what was going on at the moment of awakening. I don't think I've had all the teachings spelled out like that as being realized during that time. I always thought in my head that the Buddha had kind of started out with the Four Noble Truths and was kind of building on that as he taught. And so it's interesting to think about this as all as one conceptual package sort of arrived at in one sitting. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan, what's your comment on this?
So a couple of things. I think the first noble truth is obvious to anyone who has any degree of life experience, even if they haven't had a terrible life, and some people have, them even more so. But I think that the first noble truth is fairly obvious to me, but to Bernie's point, to get the rest of the other three, that's when you need more of a meditation practice and an understanding of karma. And there's actually books that I have in my very tall list of, how karma is more reasonable than some people might think it is. That there's, very reasonable, even almost scientific ways to understand karma as a reality. So I find that very interesting. One part of the Sutra, 22.24, says, then the Bodhisattva pondered what must be absent for birth not to happen, what must be prevented to eliminate birth. The thought then occurred to him, when there is no existence, birth does not take place. Birth is eliminated by preventing existence. So the Sutra sounds a little bit like Emil Cioran, who was an anti-natalist, who thought, well, none of us should ever be born because the life is just so wicked and so evil. But Cioran's coming at this, I think, from more of a materialist perspective, a rationalist perspective, whereas in the Sutra, it's more of, well, we're all here whether we like it or not in some way, shape, or form. But there's a karma that Cioran wouldn't have understood or wouldn't have agreed with. So to me, this is not really an anti-natalist perspective so much as we want to be reborn even better than the human realm. I think that's what it's getting at. I think that's all I have to say about it. Oh, yes, sorry, Lance. One more thing that occurred to me is one quote that I've heard before in this group is precious human life, like how rare and how precious it is to be born a human. Well, that may be, better than being born a rat or a hamster or something. And that is precious, but we're called to more than just a human rebirth, I think is the point of this, is that eventually we want to, be reborn into the Pure Land, for example, as some Buddhist traditions talk about. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Zara, do you have any comment on this? What do you think of this?
What really resonated with me was 22 that because of some of the more recent studies I'm doing, that made so much sense when you read that a few times over. You don't like if you don't have the need to be in a body, you don't suffer old age and that like the suffering. That really takes a moment to digest what that really means. It means your attachment to your sense organs, like eating, right? Even if you're like a wonderful bodhisattva, but you have like a secret samskara for food, like you're secretly a foodie, you're going to want to be, that still has to get resolved. You have to be able to let go of that, where that's just nutrition for the vessel. And there's not a sense obsession. So reading that a few times over and over and just reading the sequence, that really hit home with me, like why I'm in a body. Like I was thinking about what my attachments are and my sense organs, and like reading these different sequences for consciousness and rereading it a few times. And I think like this is like good self-study for everyone to like write down, like what are you clinging to? Like why did you, like what secretly, are you a foodie? Do you have substance abuse? Are you like a social media junkie? What is your thing? Like really becoming more attuned with it and detecting your sixth senses. Do you love to gossip secretly? You know, whatever it is. So this really hit home for me for a minute as to why I have a body. Like there's things I have to work out and resolve as to why I came back. So that really was powerful for me. The whole chapter is beautiful. That really was succinct though for me. Like there was a lot in there for me in one particular section. So thank you.
Thank you. Matt, I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not prepared to talk about this, because you weren't here for this, but had you read this before? You know, do you have any thoughts on this chapter at all? And if not, that's okay, you know, just say so.
Yeah, sorry everyone, had something unexpected come up pretty shortly before group. I haven't read this chapter, so yeah, I don't want to jump in and try to comment on it.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say about this is, you know, in the case of the Bodhisattva, who became enlightened and became known as the Buddha, you know, this was happening spontaneously. You know, he wasn't taught this. You know, these were the results of his own meditations, his own explorations, and so on. What, you know, I gather that he learned from his previous gurus that he spent as the ascetic in the forest and so on were meditation techniques, but they weren't necessarily about the Four Truths and weren't about the 12 links and so on, and the different, maybe he was introduced to slightly to the different levels of meditation. You know, in the very beginning, it talks about the Four Absorptions and so on. So my point here is that this came to him through his process of logic. You know, what makes me upset? What makes me suffer? And by going through that, he was able to, you know, organize his thoughts and be able to see that there's a structure to all of this, and he was able to detail this, to speak this, to think this in such a way that it's become, you know, a template for anyone else, you know, to be able to follow this method, to be able to, you know, come to some level of liberation, you know, but he may have gone through this many, many times. You know, obviously his power, you know, meditation is much deeper than mine. You know, I couldn't have conceived of all of this, you know, but I do understand the point of this all becomes very familiar, you know, because I didn't come to the Dharma, you know, for many, many years, you know, but I was a meditator for many, many years, you know, before I came to the Dharma. And so a lot of this process came to me, but I didn't have the wisdom to be able to understand what was really happening and so on. So my point here is that this is such a gift. I mean, all of this sutra is a gift, but this particular chapter is such a gift because it really helps us to organize and articulate in our own minds what the process is and how to stabilize it, each of the different sections of it in our experience and so on, and something that is worthy of reading over and over and over again, not just reading, but actually using it as a meditation method, a focal point of meditation, to be able to get to the point of being able to rest in that divine eye, to be able to release, to be able to get to the point of, as it says here, the end of suffering in 22.34. It says, the path has been interrupted. Impurities have been extinguished. The path to what? The path of being reborn over and over again as a migrator, going through the 12 links of interdependent origination over and over again. The path has been interrupted. The impurities have been extinguished. I've found, through logic and through experience, I've learned what it is, to why I'm experiencing this and how I can overcome this. The outflows have dried up and flow no longer. The outflows are like, leakages, the instability where, the mind wanders and is not, stable in the samadhi. The outflows have dried up and flow no longer. And the path is now ended. I travel no longer. That there is his hand, touching the earth and being here in this one place, and time has evaporated into only this moment and so on. I travel no longer. This is called the end of suffering. And he sought this. He wanted this. He chose to have this. He made decisions. He planned this and so on. It took turns that he didn't expect, because he spent 6 years as the suffering monk who was sitting in the cave and so on, and becoming the starving Buddha, the ascetic and so on. He thought that was going to lead to his liberation. But he realized that was not, and then he became. Now he had this other flow of energy. He had this. He started eating, and he was realizing that he needed his body. He needed to be able to concentrate. He needed to be able to use logic and so on. And then putting that all together, he then said, "Now I'm ready to meditate. Now I'm ready to have this experience." So this gift that he shares with us, if we take this seriously and we're looking for liberation, what we might call enlightenment or whatever, this is a great gift for us to be able to know this, to be able to learn this, to be able to practice this, to be able to define all these different elements in here is, I think, imperative. I think very important. Can you do it without it? I don't know. All I know is, this has been my experience. I went and reread, and I wrote a message to everybody last week, trying to encourage everybody to go back to the introduction, to read, what is being said, what this Lalitavistara is all about. And so I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. So it starts with I, the introduction, dot 13, and goes to dot 16, it's very short. It says, the Lalitavistara, the play in full, is not the life of the Buddha. Rather, it is the unfolding of the awakening of a Buddha. It is the recount of what happens to everyone who is in a position such as the Bodhisattva. So to put ourselves in that position is my point. I don't think any of us, this has happened to them by accident. Everybody has made choices to be here, to read the books that you've read, to have the conversations that you've had over the years. And so when you've made choices to do that, and to whatever degree you're on the path of being a bodhisattva, is the culmination of that. And so this is, as I say, a great guide to be able to help us to do that. What do you think are the most significant elements, within this structure, within these 75 verses that we just read? What do you think are the most important elements? For instance, the four absorptions, the three stations of the night, the realization of the old age, sickness, and birth, death, old age, sickness, and suffering, and so on, and dualism, those kinds of things. Bernie, what do you think? What do you think are the most significant elements in this for you?
Well, they're all important in that they're a kind of a chain. You got to have the sort of a step-by-step process. But if you had to say which one is most important, you'd have to say the one that the Buddha taught in his first sermon, which is the Four Noble Truths. So, but really, they're all very important. You could make an argument for any one of them, but if I had to come down to one, I would say the discussion of the Four Noble Truths.
How come you think that the Eightfold Path is not detailed here?
Because probably because this is the Buddha's personal experience. He didn't have to talk about the Eightfold Path because he was already at the end of the path. So for him, it wasn't like a live thing. Oh, I have to do this and then this and then this and then this, the right livelihood, etc., etc. Because he was already at the end of the path. The Eightfold Noble Path was reserved for his disciples who were at the beginning of the path.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Congo, what would you say? What do you think are one or two of the most important elements in here, and what do you think?
I think for me the most interesting ones were the Four Noble Truths, and then the path of the four jhanas. Just reading about those again and thinking about the actualization of those in practice, what that might look like and that experience is like. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan?
I agree with Bernie that the most important is the Four Noble Truths, because that is the point of all this. But I really was thinking a lot about 2210, where the Bodhisattva says, it is anguished by birth, old age, sickness, death, departure, and rebirth. And he goes on to say, but it does not know how to remove itself from this massive heap of pure anguish, marked foremost by old age, sickness, and death. So I was thinking, I talked about earlier, some people have had a, really terrible life. Some people have had something in the middle, but all of us, no matter what our lives are like, we're all going to be impacted by what I just read, which is why I think that it's in the Sutra, which is why the Bodhisattva said that, because nobody escapes from that. And I've been thinking, related to that, just a little bit about, as I age, I'm 52, and the changes that you see, the change itself, which of course is a constant, can be very painful. So there's small things that we all experience that are minor elements of what I just read in 2210. So I think that that's the universality of it. I mean,
I wanted to put forth an idea. So the Buddha realized the ending of old age, birth, and death at the seat of enlightenment, but yet he went on to become old and get sick and to die. And so it makes me think that what he overcame there was the clinging and that causes the suffering related to those different experiences. Because certainly he spent another 50 years teaching, getting older all that time. We know that he got very sick from his last meal and that he did end up passing away. Thank you.
Thank you. Zara, you have a thought? What do you think to you was the most significant part of this chapter? You're,
Yeah, sorry. Strictly 22.
yeah,
We're
yeah, let's
strictly-
stay on 22.
Well, we had started this a few weeks ago where we had done a preliminary read of the first couple pages a couple weeks ago. And I think it's that I think kind of in line with what Bernie said, it's just the documentation. It's like it's a living document of the sufferfest, I guess, that he went through. And it's relatable now still. Like if like to me, like even in this century where we are now, I can relate to this. So that's where, because like this is him coming out of it, right? Chapter 22 is about him coming out and having these light bulbs go off because he's really cleansed out all the sixth sense of the thoughts. And I think that's the whole chapter really resonates because it's not really embellished with all these, where other chapters are really embellished with the icing and cake. Like Bernie, I forgot, like had some description of it where it was like all these bells and whistles of, this is just really his description of, okay, I've got it. Here's what it is. And it's not all this distractionary, elaborate stuff. It's like, this is what's happening. So that to me is the value of this because really each section, you can read it over and over and really can become its own contemplation. A lot of these as standalone paragraphs can become their own reflection and you can meditate upon what he's saying and think, how does this relate to me? Like I'll be doing that with 22.22 for myself. But even like the questions, like they're indirect questions he's provided us to explore as he's awakened, as he's documenting us. So I think there's just value in it as almost like a study guide. If you're serious about this, like to sit back and almost journal to yourself and think about, oh, he had to think this too. I can do this with him right now. He's given you the blueprint like an architect. So I think it's like a living self-study guide. That's my opinion. That's the value of this particular chapter.
Okay. Thank you. Matt, I don't want to skip over you, but do you have a comment about this right now? I presume you haven't read this chapter, is that
No,
right?
no, I haven't read it yet. Yeah, I haven't read it yet. I was planning on reading it tonight for the first time. I don't think so. I'm just soaking up everyone's wisdom here.
Okay. Thank you. I think for myself, I think the detail that he gives, the amount of time that he spends in this chapter talking about the human condition, which really is, to me, the 12 links of interdependent origination, what the human condition is, what the elements are and so on. I think to me is the most significant thing, and the thing that, in the years that I've been studying these things, it's been the most difficult thing for me to, understand, to be able to wrap my head around, to use the expression and so on. But it's become more and more in focus for me because I've been over it so many times and not just intellectually, but to meditate on it, to think about it, to contemplate it, and to let it lead to a samadhi, to a peace of mind. It's been, and I think that for him, it must have been important too, because I think, he didn't have a piece of paper and a pencil to write down these thoughts. These thoughts were coming out as a stream of consciousness, as a extemporaneous expression of, his experience. And so it's like a stream of consciousness, and it's through the speech that this is happening, much like we're talking right now. That's why I think having these discussion groups that we have, these talks that we have, are important to get everybody to speak, because through our speaking, we hear ourselves say these things, and we hear what other people say and so on, and it gives us, a real cause to think about things. In the Bardo Todal, it speaks about, that it's through our speech that we recognize our habitual tendencies. In other words, we may think that we have intellectualized things and we've overcome things, and we may think in our heart we've purified, all these things in our heart and so on, and I've got a pure mind, I've got a pure intellectual thought and everything. But then as we speak, as we do action and so on, we give ourselves away. Our habitual tendencies come out. And it's not that it's there for punishment or anything like that, but it does reveal to us, what we've accomplished and what we need to accomplish, what work we still need to do. And this is no different than the Buddha. And through his exposition of the 12 links, it's all come together. All these different disparate thoughts and everything, because I think he was speaking, in a stream of consciousness. He wasn't planning this out. It just came up and came out. So engaging in these kinds of conversations and these studies and so on is very important for us to have confidence in what this process is.
I have a question oh, I'm sorry, Lance.
No, go ahead, Matt.
And I mean, you all might have talked about this stuff. So when he's going through the 12 links and how to reverse the process, at that point, has he already reached awakening? He's already realized nirvana at that point, and now he's trying to conceptualize it post-awakening in a way that can make sense, or maybe talk to other people about it? Or is he, through doing that, is that part of his process of reaching awakening? Like he's using some analytical meditation to get him to the final step of full awakening?
Well, it's a good question. How literal is it? Or are these his thoughts while he's sitting, for 7 days on the seat of awakening? Because he remains on the at the foot of the tree, for 7 days, it says here. So is it a literal speech, or is it a figurative speech that he's going through himself? I don't know. But nevertheless, I look at it that there's we talked about that there's a top-down realization and there's a bottom-up realization. And I think that the bottom-up was what he was doing in his first identification of the 12 links, and the second part was the top-down. And anyway, that's what I think. Bernie, you have a comment?
Well, my feeling is that he was in the process of attaining enlightenment, and
That he hadn't had it yet?
yeah, this whole description is the whole description of the process up to the final step where he signals to the gods that he's attained enlightenment at the end of the whole process. So I don't think you can say that he first attained enlightenment and then he was sort of trying to add some sort of intellectual framework on top of that. I think the whole process of working through this analytically was the process of enlightenment. At least that's the way it's presented. I think it's the way it's presented here.
But you know, but I just want to make sure I understand. But you don't think that he's attained the enlightenment? He's still working out the structure of it. Is that right?
No, I think what this is described here is the process
Yeah.
of
So he's
attaining
still working with
enlightenment.
that, but he
Kind
still
of,
hasn't. But he hasn't had the experience of enlightenment yet.
well, the whole thing is the experience of enlightenment isn't just like a finger snap. He's it's a process that takes some time, and this whole description here is a description of the process. It took him some time to work it all out. Sometimes we think of enlightenment as something that's just sort of instantaneous, but I think from this description, it's saying that no, it's a whole detailed process that needs to be worked through.
Gunga, what's your thought on that? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that if we're considering that each moment of our consciousness is a new moment, then the enlightenment process would have to be something that's re-experienced each moment. It wouldn't be something that you check off and then you kind of move on. You would have to constantly take it with you and revisit, as you know, and see your whole life through that filter. It's like sort of putting something on, and then you would have to understand reality ongoing through that process. So for me, it seems like something that would be an organic, continuous process rather than something that happened and then stopped. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan, you have a thought about this? I guess the question we're trying to talk about right now is was the Bodhisattva, had he reached enlightenment and he was teaching the process, at least articulating it to himself, if nothing else, or was he articulating it to the gods and the goddesses and so on like that? Had he reached enlightenment already to get to this point, or is he still working out the structure?
It almost sounds like he's on the cusp, right? Like he's figured it out and he's explaining it. That if he's not enlightened, he's almost there. That's what I would say.
Okay. Zara, you have a comment?
Well, I agree with what Kunga just said about just the process. Well, just as a general comment about, I think it's a dynamic process, not a static process. And I was just thinking about that because what he just said and what I'm going through right now, it's unfolding and unlayering, and I think that's why I'm still in a human body, anyways. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think the question can be somewhat answered in where it starts 22.5 and going through to 2211 or so. And these are the three stations of the night, and the levels of his samadhi that he's going through. He's already dealt with the Maras, he's already dealt with that. That was the chapter that came before. So now he's overcome Mara, and now he's there to be able to explore, this nature of mind, this free, open nature of mind. And so he's exploring that as knowledge, with knowledge. He's exploring the recollection of lives in the middle station. And he's recognizing the age-old question of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And seeing that as, the suffering that all beings go through, and being able to find a concise, answer to that. And out of that comes the 12 links.
Lance, have you heard of the dark night of the soul, like in Christianity?
I've heard the reference. I can't say exactly what it is.
I feel like it's similar to when people are they're like going through stages of awakening. I think that's like a Christian term for sort of what he's going through, right? That people have described where it's all like people joke around with the word like I'm born again or like because I know it's like this fad thing now where people like it's taken out of context, but it's like when there's a internal a spiritual shift. But I think it's not described in that way. It's under the dogma of religion, Christian religion, but I think it's really getting to the same sort of process underneath using those concepts and languages from the Christian faith. I was just curious because I know some people on here come from a Christian background. I'm listening to what you were saying, like when you said defeating Mara, I was thinking Dark Night of the Soul from the Christian faith. So, but I do agree with what you just said. I think these are good that you pointed us back to these because he has already defeated Mara. So like the sequence of events, now we would also go through ourselves, right? We would have to first deal with Mara, then we would be going through the same process. Like that hypothetically is what would happen for each of us, right? Like the same linear sequence. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. Brendan, can you speak to that? Because you're
Sure.
fairly well versed in Catholicism, doctrine, and so on.
Yeah, so Dark Night of the Soul refers to St. John of the Cross, who was a Christian mystic, and he wrote a book called Dark Night of the Soul, I think it was called, and he describes a sense of disillusionment and a sense of sadness and aloneness, um, and how that is the precursor to a very deep relationship with God. So yes, Zara, there is a a parallel there, and it brings up a broader question that I think Lance has talked a bit about before, which is similarity of all religions. And one thing I find full disclosure, I'm a lapsed Catholic. Uh, Certain elements of Catholic teaching dogma that I do not agree with. However, certain mystics, St. John of the Cross, and of course my favorite Thomas Merton, who eventually became something of a Buddhist. Um, I think there is something we can learn from these Christian mystics, even as Buddhists. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. I totally agree with that. We can learn from all these different traditions, not just Catholicism, Christianity, but Hinduism and Muslim, Islam, etc. All the different traditions have a way of expressing certain elements that can be enlightening to us all. Is Saint John of the Cross? Have you ever heard the expression of Saint John? Saint John of the Divine. It just escaped me. But
On the divine.
what was it?
Well, internet has the answer to everything, doesn't it?
Well,
St.
what
John
I'm
of the
trying to
Divine.
get to is this the book of Revelations,
Oh,
the
no, it's
Apocalypse?
quite different.
Is the dark night of the soul, that experience of revelations, of going through that death rebirth process, of examining all the various mental configurations that we go through and so on, and liberating oneself from that.
Yeah, well, my understanding of the Great Night of the Soul is a little bit different. I can't say that I speak from any kind of authority. I think what happens is that we are brought up with faith, in a faith at a certain level, and we understand it at a certain level. With it first, as a child and then as an adult, but it's generally mediated by images and thoughts and concepts and all that. And when we come to a more mystical understanding or more meditative understanding, what is necessary is we've got to drop some of these conceptual frameworks because they just act like anchors. And in the time between, one realizes the shortcomings of the our former understanding and have not yet gained the newer, more sophisticated understanding. There's a period there where we feel bereft of faith because, we've negated our previous understanding, but we haven't yet arrived at the more sophisticated, richer understanding. So that's what I think the dark night of the soul is.
So it has nothing to do with revelations then.
Well, with Revelations is sort of an apocalyptic literature. It reflects the feeling that the kingdom of Israel or the early Christian faithful were sort of engaged in a process which was transforming history, not just the individual, but all of society was going to be transformed. And that sort of literature is called apocalyptic literature. Apocalypse, what is the word apocalypse? Literally, I've forgotten again. It doesn't, we take the sense now of being the end of time, but there's the literal meaning of it is, I think it's a revealing of a secret or something like that.
Well, I just looked it
Might
up,
be wrong
just
about that.
just some words. It talks about, it uses the word the revealing or the unveiling.
Oh, the revelation, the revelation. That's of course the alternate title for the book. The more English title is the
And
Revelations.
and I've
Yeah,
read.
so you'll find apocalyptic literature in the Old Testament and in the New Testament as well. So sort of this prophetic literature that's talking about the coming of the kingdom of God. And I don't think that's really relevant
Well, you
per
don't
se
see
to
that
the
as the same
mystical.
as the Bodhisattva's awakening and becoming Buddha, crossing that threshold.
No, because in the apocalyptic literature, it's a society, a community that gets saved rather than an individual. And then the Buddha and in all mystical process, that it's very much an individual process and not a salvation of a group of people the way it is in apocalyptic literature. My opinion.
And what
You're
I'm
welcome
thinking,
to differ with me, of course.
well, it's a conversation, and I read
Yeah.
I studied it for quite a while. I wish I still had a copy of it, but it was a translation or an explanation, a commentary on the Revelation by Saint John the Divine. So whether that's the same as Saint John of
And
the
John the
Cross,
Divine is the author, of course, the author of the
yes.
book of Revelations.
So,
Right.
so am I conflating Saint John of the Cross with Saint John the Divine?
No, they're totally different people. Of course, one was named after the other. Of course, in Spanish, of the cross is de la Cruz, but which is not an uncommon name in Spanish, in Spain or Portugal. So it's just a literal translation of his name. Yeah, he was a Christian mystic, and
Who
during
was Saint John the
Saint
Divine?
John of the Cross, lived at the same time of Saint Teresa of Avila,
1500s for St.
and
John of the Cross.
I forget which 16th century, I think, but I might be wrong there.
No, you're right.
16th century, yeah. And I read one of his books, I forget which one, no, not the Cloud of Unknowing, Ascent to Mount Carmel is what I read by him. And has a very step-by-step process that describes the steps that you need to go through to have this sort of mystical experience of God. But of course, everybody's path is somewhat different. So no matter what you try to write down in a book, isn't going to be generally applicable to everybody. But first he talks about the idea that first you have to have moral perfect. He calls it moral perfection. Obviously, nothing is really perfect, but it starts with morality. Then it continues through prayer, and finally, it comes through the experience of union with God and his framework. So yeah. Oh my phone. Okay. So I mean, there's nothing much you could directly compare, although you obviously can draw parallels between the two, and it's helpful. I mean, I'm glad I read his book, but then I'm sure there are other books that are worth reading. But my acquaintance with Christian mystical literature is kind of slight. I've only read about two or three different of the classical authors, and some of Thomas Burton too. So yeah, I don't know what more to say. I guess I've been babbling for too long.
Okay. Gunga, you have any comment on this?
Well, when Bernie was talking about the path being based on morality and prayer, that just made me think about the Buddha's path being based on morality and meditation and then experience of wisdom. And I think that, the whole, in the beginning of the actual sitting for enlightenment, the first struggle with Mara, with desires, is part of that, setting that foundation of morality down. And many of the sutras, it talks about the first, in order to enter the first jhana, you have to let go of the obstacles, or you have to have a firm moral foundation to build on. You're kind of letting go of the sense desires, and I think that has a lot to do with that battle with Mara. This talked about, that's the Buddha letting those things go, all those desired distractions go, so that he can focus. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan, do you have another comment on what we're talking about here?
No, I think Tonga said it very well and interesting just now.
Zara or Matt, do you have any comment on this?
It's more of a question. I mean, where's everyone else with their battle with Mara for the senses? I'm just curious, where do people check in regularly and kind of see, are you up leveling? Are you like, a year ago I was here, now are you working through and kind of facing, are you able, like I was detailing out what mine are. It's interesting to become more aware and in tune, and instead of running from it, you can face into it and look at your, like Lance, you said, in our speech, our habitual tendencies come out because of the things our intention and our thoughts. Language is action. It's verbal action. So you're right about that. It eventually all comes out in some fashion. So it's better to lean into it versus facing away from it once you become aware of why am I doing this? And then what are the habits, and where can I resolve the karma, and how can I neutralize it? Have you, the rest of you, explored those components of Mara, like as we're describing them through the Buddhist literature, like the sense organs? Where are you? Like, do you document them? Do you try to face them? I'm just curious how other people are going about it.
Anybody like to comment on that?
I mean, I feel guilty listening to music, to be honest with you, in my car, because
What was that?
well, to give you a practical example, I feel guilty listening to pop culture music because it drains my consciousness, and I'm more aware of it after I detox from it. It's a brain drain. After you detox from it and you realize you're humming a song that you listened to 8 hours ago while you're trying to meditate because you put it on your car, like a Taylor Swift song.
Well, does that, forgive me for the use of the word, does that condemn all music, or is it just
No,
the music
no.
that you're listening to?
I'm just saying where I am right now, my consciousness, it just seeps in, and then I'll be sitting to meditate, and then Taylor Swift comes to my brain because I listened to her 8 hours ago. But I'm just saying that's how powerful the mind is over consciousness. It's so good at like pulling you back away from unlayering into your soul and spirit. So like that's what I'm saying. I don't say guilty. when I say guilty, that's probably the misuse. I'm more aware of it and have discernment that if I'm going to go in for those things, that if I'm not doing it with the joy of others, like a little kid's like, let's listen to Christmas music together. Fine, no problem, right? Because that's joyful together versus me filling in downtime and going to a low sensory type of distraction, right? Where then I'm kind of back leveling or regressing. I'm so more aware of it is what I'm saying, if that makes sense, of the response cost to my consciousness work. But I'm not there yet, and I can easily backslide, Lance, is what I'm saying. I can easily fall off the spiritual wagon in my meditation practice, not in my physical behaviors, but when I sit on the cushion, if my sensory diet hasn't been clean, I can easily backslide quickly. Like I could have a whole wasted 30-minute session because of non-optimal choices in the day.
I want to comment on what you just said, but I don't want to forget. I want to get back to what we were talking about. Kunga had brought up in terms of a parallel between morality and prayer or meditation, and the next thing I want to get back to that. But about what you were talking about, Zara, because I just talked with Matt about this. We talked yesterday. And in my, experience, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, I was learning spirituality through music. It was a golden time, if you will, of songwriting, of expression. There was a great shift in consciousness, the white hole of time, which we've talked about before and so on. And it was being transmitted in the songs, what we call classic rock these days. But I'm talking about, people that wrote like The Question of Balance, which is a concept album by the Moody Blues. And they had already done 3 or 4 concept albums that were leading up to The Question of Balance. And The Question of Balance was the culmination, was like this revelation, was this crossing over. And then the work of somebody like Cat Stevens. Cat Stevens was such a spiritual writer and performer and so on. And his spirituality and the spirituality of these other people wasn't just in the words, it was in the music that they were creating and everything. The power, just your body just vibrated with it. At least mine did, and I think some other people did too. And so I always wanted to catalog those songs, those albums, and so on, in some kind of a modern day Bible that was talking about how to attain liberation or and what we would call enlightenment now in terms of Buddhism, because I didn't know much about Buddhism in those days. So I looked at it more in Judeo-Christian terms and so on. So for me, that was very, very important, was the music aspect and so on. And the point of looking back at the past, my experience is I don't look at the past. I can, and it doesn't bother me if I do. But my point is, the thing is to be here now, and not say, oh, I've gotten here because I did this and I don't do that anymore or something like that. It's not to dwell in that or to think about what tomorrow is going to be, what the future is. It's just to be here now. That's the samadhi. That's the liberation, to be able to do that. But that's not to say that it wouldn't be helpful to look at the past and look at what might be the future in order that you exhaust that exercise. Be able to say, I got to stop doing this. I'm just playing mind games.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's my point, is at what point do you hold yourself accountable to grow? Right, to say I'm continuing in these circles with these sensory distractions, whether it's food obsessions, like whatever. Like we each have to know our own private storylines.
I think it's just in the freedom and the happiness that you're having right now.
Mm-hmm.
And how long you can maintain it. How stable are you in that?
Well, and I think it goes back to being non-attached to it as a source of happiness, right? Like the desire Like, can your consciousness and will at any point just
Yeah.
shut it off and say, no, thanks?
And where's your conceptuality? Are you resting in non-conceptuality, or are you just, going from one concept to another?
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Well, thank you. And by the way, Lance, I do agree with what you said about these artists, because I do think creative consciousness comes out in a lot of people who are like traditional songwriters. They're writing from their heart and soul. Like, they're searching for something they don't understand, and it comes out from their heart in the music. And I think that's one of the channels upward, right? I think that's part of the stopping for a lot of people who then get into full absorption, that they have to stop there and try to express it in their writing. So I do agree with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Thank you. Yeah, another one was Jethro Tull. Believe it or not, their album called "Benefit" was a great, great album, concept album of the process of liberation.
Okay, I'll have to look some of these up once you catalog them. Thank you, Lance.
But yeah, Zara, I struggle a lot with what you're talking about, and I've been trying to hold myself a bit more accountable and just starting one little thing at a time to try to, um, I have like a calendar up in my kitchen where I like check off days of, like, as I said, one thing a month, and the social pressure of my wife walking in, seeing did I check the day off or not? Not that she ever cares or even thinking about it, but in my mind, using one cliche against another, I guess. But yeah, that's something that's really a big barrier, and I definitely take your point, Lance. But I think the renunciation part of the path is certainly important, and something that I think holds me back personally. That because of my just these addictive patterns that I have, and I've always liked I think it was Tsongkhapa, his breakdown of the path and the three principal aspects of the path, which I think were renunciation and bodhicitta and uh, emptiness, and the view of emptiness or wisdom or something like that. I think that's what it was.
Mahayana.
Yeah. He that was his I don't know, one of his texts or frameworks or something was breaking down the path in that way. Um, but yeah, no, I think it's important. I find it inspiring, Zara, the degree to which you've dedicated yourself, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, I would like to have more of that myself.
I know we're recording this, and I just want to just make sure it's clear. I'm single and don't have kids or pets. So there's a selflessness and selfishness in what I'm able to do. Because if, like, when I'm with my nieces and nephews and Lance has been, I can't do half of the practices. Everything has to get cut in half. My meditation, like when the little kids are jumping on me. So to my point, anyone who listens to this, I'm only, I think, able to do this because I almost have a quasi monastic sort of environment most of the time. But when I'm with my family, it's I only do half what I'm doing. So I just want to be clear, like, it's not realistic, I think, to do what I'm doing if you are married or have children or other obligations. I think it's incredibly difficult to do this.
Zara, I just wanted to say that as your meditation practice gets stronger, you won't have as much issues with music coming into your practice, or things that you watch come into your practice. In the beginning, I think it's certainly better probably to cut back on distractions. Like, it's harder to meditate right after you watch something on TV than it is to meditate first thing in the morning when you haven't had any kind of um, things, to distract you. But I think over time, as you kind of build up your practice, and I'll just say your meditation muscles get more developed, it's easier to focus and it's easier to concentration, and you have less of those random thoughts coming in. They just don't seem to come in as much. So good luck.
I completely agree with you, and I think I think that's wisdom. Thank you for imparting your wisdom, and I think that's why Lance is also sharing his wisdom as well with the music through that. Like, it's I find it inspiring, and thank you for sharing that.
unless somebody has something else, I wanted to make a point about what Kunga had brought up before, and that was, the three knowledges: the knowledge of the morality, and the knowledge of the samadhi, as expressed in the Hindu and the Buddhism, but that might also be, prayer in Christianity or other traditions or something. You may think of it in the same way, that peace of mind that one can attain, through a particular practice, that's one of the three knowledges that's a real element in which to attain, liberation or as part of the process and so on. But the next one in Buddhism is the prajna, is the wisdom of practical things, of the emptiness, and what is empty, phenomenal nature and so on. But also contained within the prajna is the experience of the absolute, of the ultimate, of the non-conceptual, and being able to not differentiate so much, but just to understand that they can, in our terms of conceptuality, can coexist. Maybe that's the wrong way of expressing it, but they both are present at any given time in the human condition and so on. So in Buddhism, and this is one of the things that, I appreciate in Buddhism, is that wisdom, that prajna is available. But in the Christianity, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see it. At least it's not as, available to ordinary practitioners as it is in Buddhism. That wisdom aspect. Do you know what I'm talking about? Anybody comment on that?
So, Lance, just to make sure I understand, you're saying that in Christianity there isn't the access to wisdom that there is in Buddhism. Is that correct?
At least the articulation of it. And I may be way off base with this, but I've been told that in the basement of the Vatican are all these books that they sit on and don't share with people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have an opinion on that. I think, the Vatican does have the secret archives, for example. But I think that for the average priest or nun or lay practitioner, there's, you've got the doctors of the church, St. Augustine, you've got Thomas Aquinas, you've got people we were talking about tonight. So I think there's enough out there. To me, it's more like who is Jesus versus who is the Buddha. And Jesus said, you need to repent and be baptized. And it was all about getting right with your creator. And that's my issue, is what creator, right? I mean, in Buddhism, it's not really, we don't know if there's a creator. We don't really care. It's about how can we be happy. And so I think, to me, it's not that there isn't that wisdom available to Christians. It's just it's bringing us to a different place. I don't know if that's clear or not, but that's just my opinion.
Well, is that clarified in the wisdom? Is that because I would think that the essence of the Christianity is the same as the essence of Buddha nature?
There's a big preoccupation with sin in Christianity, whereas in Buddhism, to me, it's more with becoming enlightened. Both traditions believe you should treat other sentient beings well and with charity and compassion, but it's sin versus enlightenment. That's
is that the guilt complex?
Yeah, that's
that in the Christianity and other traditions, you're made to feel guilty about those things.
Here I go being very dualistic, but yes, there is an element of the the preoccupation with sin. Mia, what's the prayer? Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I am wrong. I am wrong. I am maxima wrong. It's
Well, and maybe somebody else can comment on this, but yeah, I'm imperfect, I'm impure and everything, but I'm working to overcome it. I'm not controlled by that unless I let myself be controlled by that. And my work uh, is to cut through that and cross over that to get rid of that. That's what my work is, and to me that's all part of the wisdom. It's part of the knowledge. It's understanding those elements, but then the process of how you do that is also is this wisdom part, the compassion, the method.
Hey, Brendan, in Christianity, in the texts themselves, and I guess the Gospels, is it explicit that the kingdom of heaven can only be experienced after death?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that very often the answer, let's say that I'm born quadriplegic, right? A birth defect, and I can't walk, and all these other people can walk, but I can't. So there's a very much a thinking in Christianity, well, don't worry about it because all's going to be good when you go to heaven, right? So what happens right now in this life isn't all that important because eventually you can be saved and go to heaven. So I think probably what everyone's looking for is heaven, but I think they would say you can experience glimpses of heaven or you can experience aspects of the divine here on earth. But yes, that eternal reward really happens after you die, not here on earth. So that's my answer. It's a very after death looking religion. I did an interesting thought experiment one time. I thought, is it possible you could be like a really, really, really good Christian and actually end up in a Buddhist Pure Land and not realize it? Like think you're in the Catholic heaven, but you're really in the Buddhist Pure Land. But anyway, that's kind of out there.
I think that's an easy train of thought for Buddhists to have too. They're focused on what happens after this life, what's going to happen in the next life. They forget that idea, that's just a concept that they need to get beyond. I really think that when the Buddha is talking about going beyond sickness, old age, sickness, and death, he's talking about going on beyond our ideas of fearing those things or craving those things because we think that we're going to get some kind of reward or we're going to get some kind of punishment when those happen. I mean, as soon as you're born, you start getting old, right? And if we didn't have that, what kind of life would that be? Where nothing changed. That seems like a hard to even imagine that. We can't. Without birth, old age, and death, we wouldn't have much of the joy we have in life. We wouldn't have the joy of children being born. We wouldn't have the joy when people pass on who have been suffering for a long time. So, thank you.
Kaga, you had said something earlier related to that the Buddha grew old and he died, but that he understood how to do it gracefully because of his enlightenment. And there's a lot of truth in that, I think. Facebook has a terrible habit, for those of you on Facebook, of showing us old pictures of our kids from 10 or 10 years ago and, making us go back in the past, which isn't a very healthy thing to do. But the Buddha seemed to have mastered how to be in the present moment, something Lance was talking about earlier. Lance, did you say you don't go back in the past mentally? You just always try to be right where you are right now, in the present?
That's my happy place.
Yeah. Very Buddhist of you. That's
Yeah, that's the peace. What is it, Bernie? When we talk about Mahamudra, we talk about wishlessness, signlessness.
Doorless, signless, and wishless. Doorless, signless, and wishless.
What was the first one?
Doorless,
Doorless.
signless, and wishless. Yeah, it's kind of a strange term, isn't it? Doorless, signless, and wishless. So doorless means that one does not this is the explanation I got from Kempo Kartar. One does not reflect on the past, and wishless means one does not reflect on the future, and signless, one does not grasp at concepts in the present.
Right.
So that's the three doors to enlightenment. So
Was there another synonym for doorlessness? I don't remember.
there might be another translation to it, but that's kind of
Yeah.
that translation comes from Edward Conson. He was always very literal in his translations of Sanskrit words.
But the
So
point is liberation from the three times.
liberation from the three times, past, present, and future. Right.
For my edification, Bernie, what would be grasping of a concept right now in the present? Like what would be an example?
One, for instance, one conceptually, this is good, this is bad, or this, I see this, and this is this has all sorts of associations for me in terms of intellectual. Oh, what's happening right now? Right now, oh, I must be tired. I'm tired, and it must be that because I didn't sleep well last night. So, instead of just experiencing it as it is, one puts a label on top of it. And well, the label is not necessarily false, but it can never be 100% accurate to it, because a label is always by its nature, kind of generalization, whereas the experience itself is always particular. It's always new and different than anything you've experienced before. You're only seeing the similarities between what's happening now and what's happened in the past. And that way you lose that sort of creative imagination that it would be possible otherwise.
I thought of that as the identification, aspects of who we are, what clothing you're wearing. Are you wearing the uniform of a monk? Are you wearing the uniform of a military person?
It could be that too.
How are you displaying yourself, for your own benefit and to in the face of others, in the minds of others or something? Am I trying to impress other people?
It could be that too, but it's more general than that. I think that might be one particular instance.
Yeah, no, right. It's much more general. It's just one situation. But at the same time, doing those things, having those signs of identity or whatever, they might be like crutches. They may be helpful for some period of time until some stability comes and you can hang those things up. You don't need those things anymore. I'm sitting in a room with hundreds of iconic images here and everything. Do I really need all these images now? At one point, they were very important to me. They're less important to me now, but I appreciate them.
The thing is, are you using them, or are you being used? Are you using your concepts, or are you being used by your concepts? Sometimes people get trapped in the intellectual concepts, and they become more of a hindrance than a help.
Certainly. And it's like you just said, it's the contemplation of that. It's the sorting that out. That's part of the process of being able to liberate from it.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's 9:00 now. It's my bedtime, unfortunately. Or pretty soon it'll be my bedtime, so it's time to draw this to a close.
Does anybody have any last thoughts for 30 seconds or a minute?
Way to work Cat Stevens in tonight, Lance.
You're going to put Cat Stevens in? All right.
Way to work him in tonight. Appreciate it.
Catch bullet 4. The song called Sitting.
Yes, it's great.
Google Sitting and listen to it. Yes. All right. So the dedication prayer, we'll do the dedication prayer by Lord Jigdan Sumgun. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstruct to harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good night. Thank you all very much.
Okay.
Sorry again for being late.
No,
Okay.
good night. So good to see everyone.
Okay, yeah, good to see you.
Brendan,
Hey, Zara.
thank you for being here. I hope you had a good cup of tea.
It was a pleasure. I brought it upstairs. Yes. Lovely tea.
Good.
I feel a lot better 4 hours later with tea than the other stuff. So that's
Good. I agree. I'm about to have a cup of tea. You guys have a good night. I'm looking forward to chapter 23 with you all. Thank you.
good night.
All right, good night, everybody. Cheery, bye-bye.